Hello, Internet. This is the Fair Housing Insiders, and we're going to be talking about holidays again today. But this time, we're not talking about decorations or parties. We're talking about guest policies. That's right. The in-laws are coming to town, and they're bringing some fair housing issues with them. Let's dive right in. Hello, housing providers and property managers. This is another episode of the Fair Housing Insiders. Today, we're talking about holiday guest policies. I'm your host, Michael Coughlin, and with us today is fair housing attorney Leslie Tucker. Leslie, thanks so much again for being with us today.
Yeah, great to be back. I know the holidays are a wonderful time, but they also bring unique situations that, can cross into fair housing territory.
Absolutely. Stress and mayhem for everybody and their stockings this year, right? So let's jump in and talk about some of the most common problems with holiday scenarios and guests. People are traveling, they're staying longer, bringing extended family. From a fair housing standpoint, what should housing providers and managers be most aware of?
Yeah, so great starting point. First, it's important to remember that all residents have the right to have guests. And that right cannot be restricted based on race, national origin, disability, or any of the protected classes. During the holidays, it's common for people to stay longer than usual, but your policies still need to be enforced consistently. So if you have a guest policy, which probably most of you do, such as limiting overnight stays to a certain number of days per month or consecutive days or something like that, that's fine. It just needs to be applied equally for all your households. Selectively enforcing your guest policy can quickly lead to a discrimination complaint.
Right. So we're trying to get away from case-by-case judgment calls and going with our gut, even if it's not about a protected category, because it could always be perceived as discriminatory, correct?
Right. And perception is everything, as we know. So stick to your policy and make sure that your team does the same.
Got it. Perfect. That makes sense. So let's get into something that can kind of catch anybody off guard, and it's assistance animals. But instead of just a resident with an assistance animal, we're talking about a guest bringing an assistance animal over the holidays. What are the responsibilities of the property management team if a visiting guest says their animal is an emotional support animal or a service animal?
Which is a great question. And it's a question that I get all the time from my clients. So if a guest is visiting a resident and wants to bring an assistance animal, so either a service animal or an emotional support animal, if your property has a policy that prohibits visiting animals, which is common, management has the right to go through that same reasonable accommodation process, just as they would do for a resident. What they can't do is make a snap decision and say, absolutely not. Because this is just as much of a reasonable accommodation request as if a resident made it. So remember that you still need to go through your same process for a guest.
Gotcha. That's a good clarification. Obviously, nobody out there wants to be the reason someone with a disability, resident or guest, feels unwelcome in their community, because we know that can lead to a fair housing complaint. And that's the last thing you need during the holidays. So our last scenario or topic is temporary parking accommodations. So suppose a guest is visiting for a week. Grandma's in town. She has a walker, she has a wheelchair, she needs accessible parking close to the building. What are management's obligations in this scenario?
So again, this is a valid request for a reasonable accommodation from a guest. You're not required to permanently reassign a parking space for a guest. Certainly that would be unreasonable. But if a resident requests a temporary accommodation on behalf of one of their guests with a disability, you do need to consider it. If you have flexibility in your parking setup, like you have a lot of extra parking, wouldn't that be nice? Or you have unassigned spaces, it's probably reasonable to designate a nearby spot just for temporary use if it is open. If you don't have flexibility and all of your spots are assigned, or maybe you have limited parking as it is, then again, this type of accommodation may not be reasonable or possible at all. So it really just kind of depends on what your situation is. But it does come back to, equal access, both for your residents and their guests with disabilities. Ignoring the request entirely, or just refusing to even consider it, could result in a fair housing claim.
So really, we're kind of attempting to handle this like we would any other accommodation request. It's a case-by-case basis. It needs to be documented. It needs to be responded in good faith and in a timely manner, right?
Absolutely. Yes. It protects the residents' rights, the residents' right to associate with disabled guests, and it protects your property from unnecessary risk.
Perfect. All right. Well, Leslie, thank you so much again for being with us here today. Talk about this. Holidays is just a stressful time for everybody. And the last thing that you need is a potential fair housing investigation in the middle of people moving in and out, holiday events, parties, everything on top. So it's good that we talk to our community about this. We really hope you're enjoying our videos. We want to bring you a lot more information and videos like this. So make sure to, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments section. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and make sure your team gets these videos. So feel free to share them. And please come back and see us again. This has been another episode of the Fair Housing Insiders. Happy training.